Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News. Nigerian workers are yet to begin to enjoy the 30,000 naira minimum wage that was approved for them late last year by President Muhammadu Buhari. As representatives of both the government and the workers continue to prospect for a functional modality for the implementation of the new package, many of the state governors remain unmoved in their position that it will be near impossible for their states to shoulder the cost of paying out. For a conversation on this, we're now being joined from our Abuja studio by Issa Aremu, Vice President, Industrial Global Union, and member National Executive Committee of the Nigeria Labour Congress. He's also General Secretary, National Union of Textile, Garment and Tailoring Workers of Nigeria. Besides the minimum wage, we'll also be talking about the attempt by the Central Bank of Nigeria to regenerate the country's textile industry, among other issues. Issa Aremu, welcome to the program.
Yeah, good morning.
Good morning.
My dear friend, who I can also call a comrade Ruben Abati. And let me say hi to my sisters, Leila and Tudu.
Good morning, comrade.
Good morning. Good to have you on the program. Now, what is the situation with the implementation of the new national minimum wage? We are aware that the head of the civil service has been holding meetings with junior workers, with senior workers, and Labour has been insisting that the implementation is a matter of compliance with the rule of law. The president having signed the new Minimum Wage Act since April.
Well, Ruben, I think, I'm not sure I listened to your background commentary. The national minimum wage is for all sectors of the economy, federal, state, local government, and of course, including the private sector. And as you put it in my profile, I'm also the General Secretary of Textile Workers Union. Let me also put it this way, that a good number of private sector employers have started implementing the new minimum wage. The sector I come from, we've negotiated it, and the minimum wage is in place. You also know that President Muhammadu Buhari has directed that immediately, with immediate effect, the minimum wage should be implemented at the federal level. Of course, as you also reported, discussions continue between the organized labor, ably represented by Nigeria Labour Congress and the Trade Union Congress, so now to ensure proper implementation at the federal level. And of course, I'm also a member of the National Wages and Salary Commission. And the chairman of the commission, Chief Ebule, is a principal actor in the whole process of negotiation and implementation. Now the Wages Commission is putting up the template in conjunction with organized labor on the implications of the adjustment in new minimum wage for workers who are below. Don't forget that the whole principle of minimum wage is actually for workers who are below the ladder. So the minimum wage says no worker should be paid below 30,000, the new minimum wage. It has been backed up by an act of parliament. It's already legal. In fact, it's illegal for any employers to say you don't want to implement. So it's a national law. So when I heard you saying some state governments that they can't pay, no, they must respect the law. In any case, the new minimum wage has been properly negotiated. It took us 18 months to do the negotiation. And the committee was quite inclusive. You have the federal well represented. You have 7 state governors. You have organized private sector represented by Nigeria Employers Consultative Association. You have the 2 organized labor. You have the central bank. You have the Office of Statistics who gave the necessary data. So we have crossed that bridge. We're not going for renegotiation. We're only going for full implementation. And enlightened employers, especially in private sector, know that they need to pay their workers.
Absolutely, comrade.
Now, as I was telling you, yes, so what I'm saying here is that I think the discussion going on is about the implication of the adjustment below for those workers who are up the ladder, you know, from level 17 and upward. And those are the details that have been discussed. So I'm not going to say that that's a fundamental problem. No, it's a challenge which all the stakeholders are discussing. And I have no doubt in my mind that just as it's been implemented in private sector, quickly the federal and state government, of course local government employees, will also benefit from the new minimum wage.
I'm sure a lot of people will be cheered by your optimism. But now that the ministers designates are supposed to be sworn in this month on the 21st, what would you expect from the incoming Minister of Labour and Productivity? And would you welcome a second term with that portfolio for Dr. Chris Ngige?
Well, I think, let me take it this way, that whoever becomes the new Labour minister, whether it's the old one that is being retained or whether it's a new one who will have the portfolio, it is clear that he or she must know that Ministry of Labour is extremely very, very critical. In fact, let me put it this way, it's the first ministry to ever be established in Nigeria. It was established as far back as 1914 by the colonial administration, because the colonial government also knows that you can't drive the colonial economy without critical, success factor like labor. So labor is very critical. As we say in our motto, labor creates wealth. So whoever is a minister must know that you must put institutional framework in place, policies to encourage productivity, to motivate the workforce, to pay workers very well. You can't ask for discipline if you don't put certain minimum motivational packages in place. And one of the critical issues today to motivate Nigerian workers is to pay them very well, not just minimum wage, living wage. So I would suggest to the new minister, whoever comes in, to put appropriate negotiating machinery in place in the public sector, because for now we don't have that kind of vibrant collective bargaining that we have in the private sector, where I come from. I mean, my sector, we just negotiated close to 45 national collective agreements in the decades of our existence. This is due to the fact that we have a framework in which we negotiate all the time. So we don't wait for dramatic, national minimum wage every 5 years, circle at times 7 years before we improve on our lot. So the minister must put that in place very well. Then you must also make sure that you apprehend disputes in the world of work before it degenerates. That will fix number of strikes, in a good number of sectors, avoidably so, because agreements are entered to between the government and organized labor, especially in the educational sector. Yet you don't respect the agreement.
Absolutely,
and then,
comrade.
I think the Minister of Labor have to be on duty to make sure that we prevent avoidable strikes and stoppages.
Now, comrade, one of the greatest concerns, though,
government.
Sorry, comrade. One of the greatest concerns, though, in all of this, if we speak about this in terms of the state governments, is that with the elections this year and a lot of new governors coming in, a lot of new governors lamented about meeting empty coffers. I'll take my state as an example, Oyo, where our governor, Seyi Makinde, went on quite a bit about how the accounts were kind of left empty. So this was now a worry when it now came to the implementation of the new national minimum wage. Do you think that this is one of the reasons of many why the government may now be reviewing the revenue allocation, as we can see all over the headlines today?
Well, I'm very sure those who met some governors who met full treasury, let me put it that way, that should be the opposite of empty treasury. I'm very sure they won't tell you they met full treasury. So what I'm saying here is that I think we should get it clear. The act of governance is not meant to be giving excuses. Governor Makinde, very vibrant governor, I have a lot of respect for him. He campaigned vigorously with his eyes open, went everywhere to say we ensure good governance. I'm very sure, including pay workers very well. He never campaigned to say he won't be able to pay. Did he ever say that?
No, he never did. He never did.
The treasury was empty. So if he didn't do so I don't think he comes to office and be lamented. So what I'm saying here is that I've told you this is a new minimum wage. It's backed up by the Act of Parliament, assented by President Buhari, and this is the national minimum wage that were put in place in Nigeria. It started in 1981. We've done it before, and I think it has to be done by all governors, all employers. And let me also put it this way, to pay workers very well. It's smart economics, because workers' pay is meant to, buy basic goods and services, which is good for the economy of any state. So, and if you find out states whose GDP have gone up, is because they pay their workers as a when due. I can give you the statistics if you want to listen to it. There are 2 states in the country today that are leading in terms of gross domestic product, Lagos and Kano. Just check it out. The governors pay their workers as a when due, and many of them pay above minimum wages. Some also pay living wages, and you can see that the economies of these 2 states are a bit more vibrant. So what I'm saying is, I see self-enlightened interest of any governor, or any employer for that matter, to make sure that you pay your workers very well, because you don't get what you have not put in. And the rate of return on labor is very high when the working people are well motivated and paid for. So I have no doubt in my mind that that cannot be an excuse. And I'm also happy you also pointed out the new push of the new minimum wage has now made us to face governance issues. I listened to Boss Mustafa, the Secretary of Federation, talking of new, sharing formula for the revenue allocation. Even though the way we talk of sharing, I thought we should also talk, production formula. We're used to just sharing. The revenue sharing formula, but I think we should also be talking of revenue growing formula. But it's now clear that there's an attempt now to allocate more resources to the states so that they pay properly. But I think governors must get their priority right. You don't say you can't pay when you are busy, having bloated, governance, based on patronage of political appointees in large number, which you pay them above minimum wages. You know very well, a lot has been said about cost of governance in this country. We need to reduce with modesty in governance.
Comrade Issa Aremu,
so that you can free resources for
Comrade
development.
Issa Aremu,
Yes.
we'll need to go on a short break, and then when we return, I would like to ask you a question about, the subject you already broached, which is the attempt to review the revenue allocation formula. We'll take a short break and we'll come back to you right away. We'll be back. Welcome back to the morning show here on Arise News Channel. Still with us in our Abuja studio is Issa Aremu, Vice President, Industrial Global Union, and member of the National Executive Committee of the Nigeria Labour Congress. Now, Comrade Issa Aremu, you were talking about the proposed plan to set up a committee next week to take another look at the national revenue allocation formula. Now, you were talking about production. Well, in fairness to the chairman of the Revenue Mobilization and Fiscal Commission, Elias Mbam, he said that, yes, the plan is not just to review the allocation formula, but to also do something about expanding the sources of revenue, which is a major subject of concern in terms of our federal finance. But I'd like to ask you, is it just about the sharing formula, or taking a critical look at fiscal federalism and to see how, perhaps maybe fiscal federalism can help achieve the objective of economic development, growth in GDP, because we don't quite see that causal relationship between allocation and development in the states or even at the federal level?
Well, I think they are all together, Ruben. But I'm more passionate about this law production formula, and I'm happy that the chairman of the Revenue Mobilization Committee also has alluded to the need for us to widen the base of wealth generation in this country. That's very, very significant because we are all oil dependent. With the best of fiscal federalism, Ruben, you agree with me that 98% of our revenue still come from oil and gas, and it's not that we're doing so through value additions. I just listened to the new GMD of NNPC, Kyari, who made what I can call revolutionary comment. I mean, well, if you want to put it that way, to say it's a shame for Nigeria that we are, importing petroleum products. None of the refineries is working. We are not adding value to them. So even in terms of revenue from oil, it's extremely skewed, very limited. We depend on royalty and tax from the oil companies. We hardly even capture them very well. I think my concern about production formula, what I mean about that is that we need to grow the reset of the economy. Manufacturing must come on board. And don't forget that I'm also from textile industry. And I think the states have to wake up because the industries are located in the states. They need to create an enabling environment for industry to grow. July 23rd, that's about 2 Tuesdays ago, we had the privilege of meeting President Muhammad Buhari, our National Executive Council, led by our President, Comrade John Adaji, me as the General Secretary, and a couple of our officers and textile employers. And we did some very good engagement with President Buhari, who has put in place new policies to revive textile industry. When in the 70s, 80s, Ruben, virtually all the states of the Federation had textile industry. The kind of monies the states used to generate from company taxes, personal income taxes from textile alone, they are more than what they collect now monthly from federal allocation. I mean, that's just textile alone. I mean, you can imagine automobile coming on board, food and beverages, the industries are booming. States can really generate more resources. So they need to look inward to make sure that we promote production formula. And what I mean about that is that we must create good environment for the industry to thrive. Today we have a cotton textile garment policy, very, very, very significant for us. President Buhari has put that in place in conjunction with all the stakeholders. And the whole idea is to promote the value chains from cotton growing to ginnery, to spinning, to weaving, and of course printing, including garmenting, tailoring. We can generate close to almost about immediately 2.5 million jobs, direct jobs from that sector. In the 70s, 80s, we had close to about 183 textile mills functioning, employed direct jobs of 1.5 million workers. The monies even the whole NEPA used to generate from some of these companies, they're enough to to run the enterprises along the entire value chain. So what I'm saying here is that if we can put institutional framework in place to make sure that industry thrive, you are going to employ more workers who pay personal income taxes, company taxes. Of course, the sales tax for even the goods that are being produced. That will go a long way to buffer the capacity of the states. And the textile garment policy, one of the greatest in the central bank has done, which is very, very remarkable, is to now engage in development financing to encourage cotton farmers now to grow cotton very well. Seed, have been provided for cotton growers. For the first time in our history, we are going to move from cotton deficiency to cotton surplus. Almost 23 states are now going to produce cotton. Mr. Godwin Emefiele has put this intervention in place very well. Then, above all, what is more significant, and that's why we visited the president, is that we can produce, but who is buying our goods? Now we have Executive Order 003, which President Buhari has put in place, which now encourages local content, that we should use national budget now to promote local production. So we met with all these uniform services, Navy, the Army, the police, civil defense, the customs. Now we are working on an arrangement to have a long-term contract with our factories in a way that uniforms of these service agencies will be produced locally. That will go a long way. Now, I want to call on the states, and I think President Buhari said as much, encouraging the state governors to do that kind of direct engagement, with manufacturer of textile. Of course, that's the one that affects me, to use state budget to patronize locally produced goods. Innocent I guess in Enugu, is coming on board now. They are producing a couple of cars. You can imagine if you patronize them. Pujo in Kaduna, Alanda, Nissan is also coming on board. So if we use national budget to promote goods that are produced locally, of course, factories will thrive. company taxes will be generated, income taxes will come from workers that are employed. So you find out that allocation from state becomes questionable, very, very insignificant. Of course, you can't really run industry without electricity. So we can't really drive industrialization with this epileptic power supply, in which on the eve of Salah, the so-called disco go climb people's houses to be disconnecting lights. That's even for private use. Imagine the agony of private producers who have to use generators. That increases the cost of production. So we need new thinking of partnership between the states, government, federal, and the electricity, distribution and generation agencies to have uninterrupted power supply, dedicated power supply to industry.
Absolutely.
So for me, this is the way to go.
We do hope that all stakeholders
production.
We do hope that all stakeholders rise to this challenge. But to take you back to my earlier question about the Minister for Labour and Productivity, you stressed the importance of that role. But I asked you how you would react if Dr. Chris Ngige were to be reappointed, in view of the fact that the Nigeria Labour Congress have asked the president not to reappoint him, saying that his reappointment will lead to an industrial crisis. Come August 21st, if he is reappointed in that role, what would be the reaction?
Yeah, well, Tunu, you keep on putting me on this spot, but we must have our preferences as we do, but don't forget that at the end of the day, it's the president that does the appointment. But I also want to put it this way, that I don't think it's about personalization, of whoever is there. And I hope if Mr. Ngige is returned back to the ministry, he must also have proper reflection to see how has he fared within the last 4 years. And I don't want to see our relationship with the former minister in terms of those frictions that we had alone. Don't forget that it was under his leadership that we also had this discussion of minimum wage. We got a deal on it. Recently, the ILO came around to have an entrepreneurship program, the first of such to happen in Nigeria, the first Director General of ILO to visit Nigeria on the occasion of 100 years of ILO, took place. Guy Ryder, he just left the country last week. Again, we did that partnership when Ngige was there. So, of course, we had our disagreement over the constitution of the board of NSIT, but we don't need to divide our relationship with only one friction alone. At the end of the day, whoever comes to the ministry, I've told you, has to know that labor is extremely very important. We need to promote dialogue. We need to promote consultation. We need to have open mind in a way that, we drive this economy on the account of productivity. Workers have to be well trained. We need more training and retraining. I think those are the issues. So for me, it's here nor there. If Tundu is made the Minister of Labour tomorrow, he has to be pass through the same process. The principle is the same, that
comrade,
if you do well,
comrade, we'll have to take another short break. Comrade Issa Aremu, we'll have to take another short break, and then when we return, you can continue with that line of thought. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the morning show here on the Arise News channel. Still with us is Issa Aremu, Vice President, Industrial Global Union, and member National Executive Committee of the Nigeria Labour Congress, who is with us in our Abuja studio. Now, Comrade Issa Aremu, we're back to you now. If you may just continue from where you left off before we went on break.
So what I'm saying here in summary is that the principle is the same, whoever becomes the new Minister of Labour. I just referred to the visit of the Director General of ILO, Guy Ryder, who just left the country when he came to participate in the Global Youth Employment Forum with about 65 participating countries, which took place in Abuja last week. And I was there at photo picture together with the President of the Nigeria Labour Congress, Comrade Ayuba Waba, as well as the former Minister Ngige. So we disagree, but I'm not sure we are disagreeable. We disagree on principles, and we only do so with whoever is there. If Comrade Issa Aremu is holding public office, Labour will engage him. If Ruben is there, we engage you. When you do well, we will give you the necessary cooperation. You know, if we have dispute, we must also engage each other, and I'm very sure vice versa on the part of whoever is the minister. So what I'm saying here is that I don't think we should turn it to issue of personality. What is significant is that the Ministry of Labour is extremely important, even though nowadays we talk of juicy ministry, finance, petroleum. For me, I think we should be talking of critical ministry, which ministry can add value. Ministry of Labour is important, trade and investment is important, you know, because President Buhari talks of creating 100 million jobs in 10 years. It is those ministries that have to drive them in partnership with the industry, and these jobs must come sustainable jobs. We rather come more from private sector. And I've told you that manufacturing is extremely very, very significant in that respect.
Thank you, Comrade. Now, when it comes to the textile industry that we were speaking about a bit earlier, there are a lot of issues that many people have posed and voiced with regards to why the textile industry slumped the first time around. Many state that accession to the WTO really hindered the textile industry, and others believe that the growth of exports from China to the United States and the growth of exports from China as a whole is something that also made the textile industry in a country like Nigeria slump. Now, you mentioned new policies on behalf of the president. What can we expect to see in this framework of policies coming out with regards to the revival of the textile industry?
Yeah, thank you, Leila. I think we've analyzed so much about what led to the collapse of manufacturing in Nigeria. It's not just textile. I think what makes textile very loud is because it's labor intensive. You have a company that can employ close to direct workforce of about 12,000. You know, UNTL in Kaduna, the biggest in West Africa. You have Afprint, you Aswani, Textile, in those days, they employed a number of workers, in Lagos, in Kano, in Aba, in Port Harcourt. So anytime such companies close down, the news is bigger. And of course, we're also organized, we're very vocal. But you discover that the same thing has happened in automobile. Manufacturing value added in this country was as high as about 22%. In the 80s. Today, it's less than 4%. Ghana beneficiates more, add value to its raw materials than Nigeria. Of course, South Africa is the leading manufacturing country in Africa. Close almost about 25% of value addition. Nigeria is less than 4%. So what I'm trying to say here is that the same factors that have been going to be put in place to revive textile are applicable to every one of them. We must buy what we produce. And that's why I commend President Buhari on Executive Order 003. We must amend the Public Procurement Act to make sure that national budgets, we have the highest budget this year, about 9 trillion, although that's still very small for a big country of 200 million people. But that 9 trillion naira can go a long way to turn the economy around. I want to commend CBN again for the creative intervention to make sure that foreign exchange will only be made available for those who want to produce locally here, to buy necessary raw material if necessary, or manufacturing. But Emefiele has stopped foreign exchange to those who are importing, including smugglers. That's very, very critical. One of the things clear our sector today, or manufacturing in this country today, is smuggling. I just read this morning, I saw on TV how customs have, apprehended, thousands of tons of parboiled rice, from smuggled to the country. That's complete scandal. At the time, we're already building self-sufficiency in rice production. The same thing happens to textile. You have first of dump textile goods, second-hand goods that come to the country. I think custom must be on duty. So beyond the monetary authorities or development intervention of CBN, government, President Buhari commitment to buy local, I think we need more activism on the part of the customs to make sure that we block smuggling. Because smugglers actually undermine the economy. They don't pay duties. So customs will also have enough revenue, which will not go to federal allocation or federal ports. So everybody's a loser. And above all, they come here and undersell our products because for them, cost of production is virtually nil. They just dump here, and they also bring inferior goods to the country. The same thing happens to automobile. So I think the customer have to be on duty, not only at the border, but they must make sure that even when they come in, we should engage in seizure. And we have told President Buhari that we need a presidential task force that will be made of all the stakeholders so that we can be able to make sure that we deal with smuggling. Now, we've just signed the African Continental Trade Growth Act, which is very commendable, and I think Africa should trade with themselves rather than relying on aid. But we can only trade in what we're producing. So we need to make sure we get our production some very right. And I'm happy that the presidency has put conscious optimism on African Continental Growth Act to say, wait, we must address production issues and at the same time make sure we benefit from that. But don't forget that there was a time in the 70s, 80s, Nigeria not only produced locally textile, but we also supply West African sub-region. In fact, some of our mills have branches in Cotonou, in Ghana. So this is the time for us to take advantage of the new Continental Trade Act. But we must produce, we must make sure the the source of origin of the product that come in are clear. They are truly from Africa, not from China, not from Thailand, as the case may be, depending on the product. So I think there's a lot we can do. Of course, I've told you about the need for electrification. That's important so that our production costs could be low in a way that we can be seen to be extremely competitive. But let me also end up on this non-textile. One of the key suggestions we gave the presidency is that we must establish Ministry of Textile. And we meant this very well. India has it, Bangladesh has Ministry of Textile. In those two countries, they employ 5 million, 4 million direct jobs, in those sectors. We can get all these youths on the road, to become producers. Whether it is insurgency, people following us stuff, funny religious messiahs, you can see early on Monday morning, people are organizing demonstration. These are youth should be working. Mondays are meant for working. They are not meant for you to be televising. I think Nigerian revolution is the low one to be televising, because you have family of youths who are unemployed, who are not properly engaged. I think they should be in the factories working. And I think state governments should complement what the federal government is already put in place. So now we have a textile garment policy, which all of us must key into. So we asked for Ministry of Industry, very, very important. And we say that if that's not possible immediately now, then dedicate a whole Department of Trade and Investment to drive the cutting textile garment policy. Well, but I think the ministry is possible. If you can have Ministry of Iron and Steel, how many factories do you have? How many companies do you have in iron and steel? How many are working? We have a ministry for it. You have Ministry of Mining. How many mining? We are talking of potential 250 textile garment companies. Yes, I think India has done it. India has done it. China has done it.
If I may come in here, very useful information about what is being done with the textile industry. You want the Ministry of Textiles. Well, in some other countries, they even have something like Ministry of Railways. So, to put a special focus on certain sections of the economy. Yeah. But I would like to take you back to this point about the new proposed revenue allocation formula. And the chairperson of the Aremu FC has said that next week a committee will come up. Now, we've been having this since 1946. From the colonial era, so many committees have been set up. Philipson Commission, Aboyade Commission, Raceman Commission, Okigbo Commission, all kinds of commissions on what should be the right formula for allocating revenue from the distributable pool account. Now, what, in your opinion, would be the fair and realistic formula for revenue allocation? Will you, for example, recommend that derivation, that we take a second look at derivation? Some states say, we should have 50% derivation. Some people have raised issues about VAT, although state governments get 40% in terms of VAT. Would you like to see a reduction in what the federal government gets, an increase in what the states get and what the local governments get? Because, the whole issue has been politicized. And if we want the states to be centers of productivity, there must be a good formula, a fair, equitable, realistic formula in place that will deepen the capacity of the states to come up with useful fiscal policies. What would you recommend?
Well, Ruben, I was also a member of I was one of the Labour delegates to the 2014 National Conference. And one of the most contentious issues at that national conference, of course, set up by the former governor, Goodluck Jonathan. And since we're all using the word revolution now, I want to say that that conference was very revolutionary because we built consensus on a number of issues which people thought would not be possible. And I want to use the medium that President Buhari should still try and revisit the outcome of that national conference. Even though I was disappointed that President Jonathan couldn't even make any attempt to implement some of the recommendations of the committee put in place, but it was commendable, it was in place, and I commended all the delegates for building consensus. We had a lot of intensive debates on these issues you have raised, whether it's going to be derivation. The issue of resource control also came up. Of course, Labour had the far more radical perspective because we normally use the criteria of the three-tier of government, federal, state, derivation. We also said no. If you look at, and I'm happy, Ruben, you went on memory lane from the 40s, 50s, but that was a period of productive Nigeria. So the issue is to share because things have been produced. We have vibrant regions, who are competing with themselves, I think we should also think outside the box now because production is low in this country. 9 trillion naira budget, that's not enough to fix roads. We talk of rails. Budget per capita in this country is extremely very, very low. 200 million people to share, 9 trillion naira. By the time you disaggregate in dollars, we're far, far below Ghana, far South Africa. I think we should think of how to bake the cake. But even at that, the formula for sharing now, I thought, and I would like, I hope the committee is all inclusive to include Labour, because we shouldn't leave this thing to, vested interest. You've said so now, that the discussion has been highly politicized, so we have to look for dispassionate organization who can look at issues. Now, we have signed on sustainable development goals. Nigeria already mixed Millennium Development Goals in 2015. Out of those 8 goals, we fell below, although this morning I was so happy to hear that Nigeria will soon be declared polio-free, because we have now recorded 0 polio, with a good effort in the last 5 years. That's commendable. But we missed fundamentally some of those 8 goals. But we've signed on sustainable development of 2030.
We don't have.
So we need to have a formula that will derive that, in a way that.
Unfortunately, Comrade, time is no longer on our side.
But we can discuss those details much more.
Yes, and we'll need to bring this segment to a close. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you very much. We appreciate your conversation with us.